black man to be accused of the murder of a white man and found not guilty by an all-white jury. His name is Charles Caldwell. Faced with a ridiculous amount of opposition, one thing Caldwell stood for was the unequivocal fight for the rights of the black people. He wasn't one to chicken out of a fight, but stood in the face of adversity with confidence and grit. The 1860s was a critical period after the Civil War, commonly referred to as the Reconstruction era. The main goals were to rebuild the nation and to address the impact of slavery. Charles Caldwell was already serving as a senator among 4 other black men in the Mississippi Senate, spearheading most of the bills that directly or indirectly benefited the affairs of black people living in Mississippi. Although none of these movements ever went smoothly, plantation owners, anti-Reconstruction Democrats, and white supremacists fought back against all of his agendas. They were intimidated by the fact that a man who was just 10 years free had a lot to meddle within the law. But Charles Caldwell was no ordinary politician. He was strong, he was fearless, he was dead shot, and nobody wanted to meet him face to face. So, all the arrays and plots against him were organized by white Democrats and plantation owners behind his back. Against all odds, he still persisted in fighting for a common cause among the black people. Not only was he well respected by both whites and blacks, but he also stood as an intimidating terror to the racist white supremacists and to all those who constantly opposed his forward-changing agenda. Caldwell identified with a faction of the Republican Party known as the Radical Republicans. They targeted the rebuilding of the nation as well as the immediate, complete, and permanent eradication of slavery in the United States. Some of the bills Caldwell stood for included free public education for children regardless of race, and for the first time, voting rights for black men. Threatened by the possible future of Mississippi, white Democrats as well as well-connected plantation owners did everything within their means to reclaim the state legislature. At that time, Mississippi's population constituted more black people than whites due to the state's long history of slave importation. This further fueled the fear of a possible white minority suppression. It was said that between 1870 and 1875, the Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacist organizations killed several hundred black men and women, as well as white Republicans who stood with Charles Caldwell. Caldwell himself had a death mark on his head. Regardless, he remained ever stringent in his cause. He envisioned a better future, one in which Negroes could exercise equal rights in a society that they all deserved. Though literate, he lacked the formal education which was of flowery standards of that era. Caldwell wasn't particularly a great political orator, but he was regarded as a lucid and clear speaker who calmly and unequivocally made his cases on the Senate floor. A Democratic speaker once stated, Caldwell was far above any Negro in intelligence. He helped guide his party, and as the Warwick of the administration, he became one of the strongest supporters of Governor Ames, a radical Republican too. The 1875 elections drew near. It was a major election everyone anticipated. It was going to determine whether a biracial democracy would survive in Mississippi, a cause Caldwell long fought for. On the day of the first political campaign gathering, everything seemed to have been going fine. At least 1,500 of those in attendance were African Americans, including Caldwell. Caldwell had insisted that all attendees avoid alcohol and come without their guns, but not all complied. Several black Republicans, as well as whites, came in with concealed weapons as though they anticipated a scuffle following the procession. In an attempt to calm tensions and establish a neutral ground among Republicans and Democrats, Caldwell invited an opposing member from the Democrats to speak. He duly came and gained a respectful hearing from the mostly black crowd, as Caldwell had hoped. But when it was the turn for the Republican representative to speak, the white liners heckled him, interrupting his speech. The procession, which had earlier seemed to be under control, became heated up, as things escalated within seconds. Wrestles broke out between opposing parties. Shots were fired, followed by a general pandemonium that left 3 whites and at least 8 blacks dead. This was the beginning of what seemed to be a racial war. The 4 days that followed were filled with bloodshed, during which local whites and highly trained mercenaries systematically sought out and killed an estimated 50 Republicans, most of whom were black. Caldwell and 500 others managed to escape and find safety in the state capital, but the vigilantes were prepared to wait and carry out another attack, as they had orders to have him killed. A U.S. Senate investigation of the violence in 1875 Mississippi revealed a network of Democrats, many of them former slaveholders and plantation owners, fueled the attacks as they were determined to restore white minority rule by any means possible. The violence became so intense that Mississippi's Republican governor, Adelbert Ames, in a bid to bring back sanity, assembled the state's militia and placed Caldwell in charge of the match. The plan was to keep everyone in order and protect against intimidation and disenfranchisement of voters until at least after the election. However, this provoked unrest among the white population as they feared a possible overpowering of the white minority. Few weeks down the line, the governor succumbed to Democratic pressure and was pushed to pull back the militia in exchange for the Democratic pledges to campaign peacefully. When Caldwell realized he had no more backing from the governor, he sent multiple letters urging for a reconsideration. In a letter to Ames, he wrote, "So far as the democracy in a large portion of this county is concerned, the peace agreement is held in utter contempt and only serves as a cover for the very wrongs upon the freedom of the elective franchise which it was intended to prevent." Ames either ignored such reports or felt he could do no more to help the Republican cause. He simply stated, it had to be done. Deprived of any military support, Caldwell still managed to provide a forceful example for other Republicans in Clinton, both black and white. As the elections drew nearer, the disenfranchisement of voters continued. Many threatened, killed, or scared into hiding. Caldwell himself received several messages warning him against showing up at the polls if he wished to keep his life. The November elections took place, which was unexpectedly marked with fraud and voter intimidation. Although it looked like an already lost cause, Caldwell came up boldly, casting his votes to the surprise of many of those who placed threats on him. Although he lost his Senate seat that day, he proved that no amount of Democratic intimidation was enough to scare him into cowering away. The attacks on Charles Caldwell did not end after the Democrats won the election. They stated that, even if things went their way this time, they cannot afford to let an opposition like Caldwell roam free while knowing what he was capable of. Today, he proved that no amount of Democratic intimidation was enough to scare him into cowering away. The attacks on Charles Caldwell did not end after the Democrats won the election. They stated that, even if things went their way this time, they cannot afford to let an opposition like Caldwell roam free while knowing what he was capable of doing. The period that followed the election was characterized by plots to assassinate Charles Caldwell. Senator Buck Cadwell, who was one of Caldwell's trusted compatriots, fell into a conspiracy with the white Democrats and was given the assignment to lure Caldwell into a death trap. On the Christmas day of 1875, Caldwell went into the town of Clinton to learn about his nephew who had been threatened earlier that day. When he returned back, he encountered his acquaintance, Cadwell, who invited him to a toast in celebration of Christmas. Caldwell was reluctant at first, but agreed to tag along after much persuasion. While the two men stood in the basement having a chat, Cadwell called for a toast, which, apparently, was a signal to the assassins. As they touched their glasses, Caldwell was shot at the back of his head as he stood by the window. On realization that he had been cornered and ambushed, his last request was to be carried out to the street so that all may see that he remained defiant to the end. His request was granted. In the middle of the street, and with his last breath, he stood up to say, "Remember when you kill me, you kill a gentleman and a brave man." Never say you killed a coward. I want you to remember it when I am gone. At that instant, more bullets were fired at him, till he was confirmed dead on the spot. Other black men within the vicinity were also killed, including Caldwell's brother, Sam. Days after their death, a jury who had claimed to have investigated thoroughly failed to convict anyone for the murders. A report from the grand jury stated, "We have been unable to find the party or parties engaged in this deed." The whole affair is shrouded in mystery, and though nearly every man, white and colored, who lives in or near Clinton has been before the jury, we have no proof sufficient to attach guilt to any man. We have had every witness that could be heard of who was likely to know anything of the affair, but utterly failed to lift any evidence upon which we could take action. Within a year after the incident, Caldwell was already buried, as well as the fight for Reconstruction. The white Democrats had regained the state in all control. Within 2 decades, a political system that gave only a few black voters the opportunity to exercise voting rights was established. However, the Second Reconstruction came, which lasted until long after World War II. In 1965, the Voting Rights Act was enacted in federal law, the same right for which Caldwell and thousands of others had given their lives. Charles Caldwell is believed to have been born around the early 1830s in Hinds County, Mississippi. Although little is known about his early life, he was born into slavery, years before the Civil War. At the time of his birth, slavery was at its peak in the region. Slave trade was a crucial part of the state's social and economic life. Slavery was so profitable, it sprouted more millionaires per capita in the Mississippi River Valley than anywhere in the nation. In 1820, Mississippi had 33,000 slaves 40 years later. That number rose to as high as 437,000, earning the largest slave population in the country. During this time, the prices of slaves rose and fell with the price of cotton, as this was the major export crop in the region. Slave sales were usually painful events. Families were ruthlessly torn from each other. Slaves were humiliated, treated like livestock, and harassed while being inspected for their physical features during sales. Caldwell possessed exceptional skills in this trade, earning him more privilege and autonomy compared to his fellow slaves who worked tirelessly on the plantations. He was considerably well respected within his community. In the immediate post-war period, after the fight against slavery was supposedly won, was when Caldwell began pursuing a career in politics. Rewarded for his dexterity and reputation, he was elected the position as one of 16 black Republicans amongst 78 white politicians to participate in the Mississippi Constitutional Convention in 1868. This marked the beginning of his political ambitions. The story of Charles Caldwell, the Negro leader, is a testament to the power of resilience, determination, and leadership in the face of adversity. Throughout his life, Caldwell faced numerous challenges and obstacles, including systematic racism and discrimination. Yet, he persevered and emerged as a prominent figure in the fight for equal rights and social justice. His name has appeared, but rarely in books, and then only in terms of derogation, such as a Negro of desperate character, one of the most daring and desperate Negroes of the day, a notorious and turbulent Negro. However, adjectives frequently characterize their users more aptly than their subjects. Caldwell's legacy extends far beyond his lifetime. His contributions continue to resonate in the ongoing fight for racial equality and justice. His story serves as a reminder that one individual's determination and courage can make a significant impact on society.